8 of the North South podcast with me, Dave Allenson, and
me, Andrew Hardwick.
Today we are going to do the fabled strength and conditioning episode where we're going to actually talk about our day jobs for a little bit. And we've decided that the way we're going to do this is to try and look at what are the problems or what are the mistakes that we see people making, because we could really go into detail about what you could do, but actually a better place to start from is what definitely not to do. So
I'm sorry, it's just started already, and I've just noticed there's a little dog's head just staring at me from behind.
Amazing. There he is.
There he is, he's just staring at me. Kicking off. He's just heard strength and conditioning, and he was like, the brain's behind the operation, that's why.
But yeah. It's like, you're not inviting me on.
Yeah, this is he does all the work. He designs all the programs. But yeah, so yeah, strength conditioning. Sorry, that was not the best start. Right. I got distracted.
But I think it's not a bad one for us to do this week. We've both had a busy few weeks with clients competing, and it's been an opportunity to kind of reflect a little bit. So we thought we'd start with just what do people do wrong, and I think, go on. If someone was to come to you and their goal was to ruin jiu-jitsu as quickly as possible for themselves, what would you do with them for strength and conditioning?
So, I mean, first and foremost, I'd send them to Gracie Barra.
Not so much the skill side. Come on, let's just talk about physically.
I'm taking the piss. So the easy answer is very general: is do too much too quickly. I think it's very difficult to obviously give a clear-cut answer because it's obviously going to depend on the individual. Unfortunately, in the strength conditioning world, there's a lot of bad practice gets covered up by the fact of individuals with extremely good physical capacity, which makes it really hard for the sort of everyday individual to make good rational decisions because they obviously don't understand the nuance behind that. So it's very easy to look at an individual who may be doing something absolutely extreme. Like let's use a very broad example as Tony Ferguson, the David Goggins situation.
Yeah.
So like it'd be very easy for somebody with an untrained eye to go, oh, Tony Ferguson does these extreme workouts before a fight camp. That must be what I need to do.
Yeah.
Whereas anyone, I mean, hopefully, if you've got any sense of common sense, you'll know that is one of the most ludicrous things you should be doing. But we can't put it past people. But that essentially is to do too much too soon than is necessarily needed. And it's a very broad answer, and there's a lot of context that we can give into what that might look like in real world time. But that essentially would be, if you, like you said, if you ask me what I would do to ruin an individual, it is just to throw a load of shit at the wall and hope some of it stuck.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice answer, and that is absolutely what I would do with them. I would push the intensity too high, so they'd be using far too heavy a weight where the quality of expression was shit. So we'd be hitting 1 rep maxes week in, week out, and then we'd probably follow that up with shitloads of bodybuilding style volume. High frequency, so like 5-6 sessions a week. I'd try and cover that up by going, oh yeah, we'll do a bro split, so you've got time for your muscles to recover. And
loads of sprinting.
Just run them into the ground, because the problem is that loads of sprinting, fucking hell. We've talked about this before. I won't name names or go into any more detail, but I once had a jiu-jitsu client who was missing jiu-jitsu sessions because they were or had been previously missing jiu-jitsu sessions because a different coach had programmed them sprint sessions and they were doing those instead. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but the speed at which you can sprint doesn't really fucking do anything when you're on a mat. But
yeah, when you're flat on your back and your feet aren't attached to the floor, there's no fucking good sprint is going to do, is there?
Maybe you're just doing that on your back, but
yeah, you're
just kicking your legs as well, like a dead bug. So I would do that. I'd also, this is the other thing, I'd try and replicate as many things from jiu-jitsu as possible
that's a
in
good
the
one.
gym.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah, so like I'd have them shrimping up and down the driveway with a weight attached to them for no reason. I'd have them sticking fucking those bands on and doing everything with
Yeah.
a band attached to them and then attached to the wall behind. We'd warm up with fake takedowns with dopamino bands.
Playing guard with a barbell.
You've seen that one too. I saw one years ago where a guy had wrapped a gi around the barbell. So not
Yeah.
only was he playing guard with the barbell, but the gi was wrapped around it and he had spider guard.
Fucking unbelievable.
So yeah. So to put it simply, from both of us, it's you escalate things too fast, you handle weights that you shouldn't be handling, so the intensity is too high too quickly. You're doing too much, so it's impacting all of your actual mat time sessions. You're doing things that have little to no bearing on the sport, either things that are from other sports and matter, like sprinting's great if you're a rugby player, it's a key skill, you should be doing it regularly. But for us, it's absolutely fucking
It's
useless.
pointless.
Yeah. You can, if you like it, lovely. You can work a little bit of that insensibly for certain clients if they're desperate for it, but you don't need it for anything. And then we try and replicate as much stuff in the gym as possible, so that we can really fuck up people's engrams and make sure that they can't do any of the skills properly because we've got in the way.
Oh yeah, pre-fatigued skill training. I'd do that as well.
Oh yeah. Make sure everyone's exhausted before they go and learn things.
You've got to learn to fight when you're tired, haven't you? Fucking hell.
Right, so I'm going to put, like I do every fucking episode, I'm going to put my teacher hat on for a second. Skill learning is just learning. And you learn best when your brain's not tired. And if you come to a session and your brain's already tired, you ain't learning very much.
No.
And I can't give you the studies for that, and I don't think it's necessary to, because it's self-fucking evident that, yes, you can learn to perform while tired, but that is not where you should be learning new things.
No.
It's just fucking stupid.
Performance should be
We've
expressed.
never done Spider Guard.
Yeah. Performance should be
really
expressed
technical.
as fresh as possible.
Yeah.
You want everything to be firing. Brains, muscles, nervous system, all that shit. We want that to be like, this is what we're here to do. Not fuck me, I'm tired today, I'm gonna have to try and do something here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so again, it's obviously obviously me and Dave being the type of people that we are and the responsibility that we feel we have towards the job, it's to be the very shithouse strength conditioning answer with all this sort of stuff is everything very much depends. There is a lot of context and a lot of nuance into this conversation. It is extremely difficult to make broad, sweeping statements about strength conditioning without any context of an individual.
Yeah.
Like, to give an example based off something that we've already talked about today, what we'll have to do throughout this episode is assume that when you're listening to this, jiu-jitsu is your main thing, because that's the only way to really give you a good, decent bit of context. So we have to assume that jiu-jitsu is the only activity that is your primary driving goal. If you're somebody who plays rugby, but also does a little bit of jiu-jitsu on the side to help with the rugby side of things, like Dave mentioned, a bit of sprinting probably is not a bad idea. But it's that always has to come to question of like why you are doing things, what's the decision making behind it, what's the rationale behind it. And the majority of the time when it comes to strength conditioning, it's about making decisions that are relevant for you as an individual that are going to enhance your practice in some way or another.
Yeah.
Now, the difficult thing is whenever it comes to any sort of physical task is we always have a positive and a negative. So everything comes at a cost. And usually that's an energetic cost, whether it's physical energy, mental energy. And that cost, what our job is as coaches, is to manage that cost. What's the reward to fatigue ratio that we generate from doing something? Now, again, there is a little bit of nuance to this, and obviously, again, different individuals are going to manage it very differently.
Yeah.
And I think that is the difficulty that comes with making generalized statements. Is it always depends. because there's a lot of information that we have to gather.
It's also why I think program hopping or coach hopping, it can be really unhelpful. Now, I'm not saying if you don't like working with someone, carry on working with them. That's not the case. But part of the reason that people maybe don't get the results that they're looking for is because coaching is a process where you can test different variables and start to see how different people respond to different things. So I've got 2 clients who are roughly as strong as each other. I'm not going to name names. They'll probably know who they are. It doesn't mean all of their numbers are exactly the same, but one of them is very, very, can grind out a lot of reps and can handle a lot of volume, and he's fine. I have another who's very, very explosive, maybe not the springiest person that I work with, but he can move things very quickly or not at all. And he cannot handle lots of volume. He needs a lot of RPE based work, so a lot of everyday maxes and things where he can choose for how he feels on the day, because I already know he's going to throw everything around at max velocity because that's what he does. And that's one of the things that it took me time to learn, and I know that about them because I've made mistakes for each of them. Like what is exactly the perfect training for one will run the other one into the ground quite quickly. And although they're both on a similar thing, they do similar exercises, we look for similar outputs, it's the nuance, it's the lot of fine details that make the difference in their programs for each other, even if that's just about knowing how each of them lifts. So I know that one can probably handle more because it's a slightly lower velocity, so it's not going to trash him, and the other one needs slightly less because he's, as I put it, he's explosive enough to get himself into trouble quite quickly.
Yeah.
That's just one example.
Yeah, and it is again, like you said, it's interesting. And this, what we've got to be careful of is turning this into a fucking sales pitch.
No,
is
buy our stuff.
But obviously, if you listen to this, there's obviously we're going to talk more about sort of a bit more depth around sort of certain other problem areas, but again, to utilize that first point of call, it's like, well, what mistakes would somebody make? And I think a really easy thing to assume is like the amount of work. Again, assuming that jiu-jitsu is your main thing. So let's say we take an average person who trains 4 times a week on the mat. Average person. We're not talking about competitor. We're not talking about a full-time athlete. We're just talking about the everyday average purple belt. I don't know. So let's say you assume we train 4 days a week. The level of intervention you need from a strength conditioning perspective is by and large a lot less than you actually think.
Yeah.
I think I can't remember the research off the top of my head, but I think there was a really good piece of research conducted, one of the very rare in the modern day that sort of revolutionary pieces of research emerged in the strength conditioning world. But
yeah.
This was more to do with like hypertrophy of muscle mass as opposed to strength. I can't remember the strength numbers, but I'm pretty sure it was something like 1 set taken to failure per week per muscle group was enough to maintain muscle mass within a specific muscle group. So 1 set, like if you contextualize that, like if I wrote a program for you and I wrote 6 exercises of 1 set, you'd probably look at me and go, well, be like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, well, this isn't strength training. Now, obviously, again, that's one study. And again, a lot of nuance I don't know who, I can't actually remember who the study was partaken on or any of the sort of testing procedures within that. But it gives you a small insight into this idea of like, well, I probably don't need to be doing 10 sets of whatever it is. Like,
10
now
sets
again,
of
10.
Like
10
German volume training.
Like Dave said, obviously there is going to be some nuance behind this, depending on you as an individual, and how you are physically made up. Like, what is it you're good at, bad at, whatever it is, movement capacities, all that different stuff. But like, it just goes to show that the amount of work you actually need from a volume perspective or an intervention standpoint, whether it is intensity or volume, whichever side or frequency, is probably a lot less than you actually think. Now, in the real world, there might be a little bit more work that's needed. I'm not recommending you only do one set. It's more just a point as like giving you some insight into like, oh, you actually probably don't need as much as you think, especially when you're training a sport on top of it. And the amount of work that you could probably, especially for any obviously advanced lifters. Now the amount of advanced lifters in jiu-jitsu is pretty slim. In terms of like context, like when we talk about advanced lifters, we're talking about power lifters, bodybuilders, Olympic weightlifters, guys that are training
like
for strength
competitive
sports. Like,
in those strength sports.
That's what we consider an advanced lifter, like somebody whose only primary task is to lift weight. Jiu-jitsu players will probably work upwards towards intermediate lifters. And that the amount of work, again, like I said, I'm keep repeating myself, but like the amount of work you actually need to achieve that is much less significant than you probably is. Now, again, that doesn't factor in how much you enjoy lifting, how much benefit you get from lifting personally, the mental side of things, the physical benefits. Obviously, we're talking purely statistical. But it is much less than you actually think.
Yeah, and I think the other big mistake that people make is assuming that they need to take the kind of template that strength sports do. Like, if you look for strength training programs online, by and large, you'll find the same shit that you and I found when we did this. For me, fucking 16 years ago when I was looking online, it was all bodybuilding, it was all powerlifting. I wanted it for rugby. Actually, rugby looks completely different. It would have involved a lot more sprinting than what I was trying to do, but it's, by and large, the field what you will find in the mainstream is dominated by either bodybuilding, maybe some Olympic weightlifting. Sometimes you'll get the guys who are like, Olympic weightlifting is the key to being powerful and strong and all those, it's a fucking magic panacea for everything, rather than a sport where the people who are good at Olympic weightlifting are good at Olympic weightlifting because they already did those things. Like, it's like saying sprinting makes you faster. Yes, faster than you were before, but sprinters are elite sprinters because they're good at sprinting, not because sprinting made them good at. But anyway, it's chicken and egg. But you look online and you will find bodybuilding, powerlifting, maybe some power building, maybe some hybrid or CrossFit stuff, depending on what people decide to name it that week. And what we're trying to say is that taking an approach that comes from a barbell sport, where the strength training is also the technical skills training, is fucking stupid. Because those people need to be in 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 4 days a week, depending on how advanced they are or whatever it is. Some guys towards the end of their careers cut it down shorter than that because what they're capable of expressing will trash them if they did 5 days a week. But you don't need a strength sport solution because this is not a strength sport. No one gives a shit what you bench press on the mats. No one cares what you can back squat. They care, did you take them down? Did you beat them? Did you choke them out? Did you do whatever within the sport itself? So Andrew's absolutely right to say it's probably less than what you think you need because you're used to seeing outliers. Like, if you're looking at Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, you won't see any normal people because people don't give a fuck. The algorithm does nothing for them. If you are Larry Wheels and you're juiced to the fucking eyeballs and you're quarter repping shitloads on bench and people are going, oh my god, it's a new personal best, like, that goes wild. Or that's not a dig at Larry Wheels at all. He's also lifted some outrageous weights through full range of motion, but that's the stuff that goes well. And that's it's going to select that and it's going to show you. I remember I back squatted like 170 and was really proud of it. It took me a fucking week to do it because I just kept missing it because I couldn't get out of my own head. And within a day, Instagram had shown me a small Asian woman hitting 160 for a triple. And I was like, oh, great. Fucking cool. But that's the reality, is that the outlier stuff will always get pushed to you. So no, you don't need what most people will be telling you that you need. You need a lot less than that. And that's a good thing because it means that you can physically develop and feel good and train hard on the mats and essentially have your cake and eat it, but you just need to be a little bit more patient about how long term you need to look at it.
It
because
is
if you want
difficult,
short term improvement, it's not necessarily going to be very easy alongside jiu-jitsu.
It is interesting in it. Like it's quite a tough thing to sell. It's not the most sexy thing to sell. Like I remember I had a conversation with a client of mine.
Just do this for 15 years.
Yeah. Like I had a conversation with a client of mine the other week. And every week when, like, obviously I probably same for you, Dave, but like when they check in, they've got to score the week out of 10. So like, how would you score your week out of 10? 10 being unbelievable, and 1 obviously, well, I've never seen a 1, so I wouldn't know what that likes to context. But I remember he was sort of saying like he was getting frustrated because he was sort of seeing like 7s and 8s out of 10 consistently.
Yeah.
And I sort of said to him, I was like, I understand where you're coming from, but that is sort of where I want you to be. Like,
That's the real world.
That's the real world. Like that's what performance, quote unquote, performance is. It is a 7 out of 10 week after week. Every now and again, you might have a 5 if you have a stinker. And every now and again, you might have a 10 if you have an absolute blinder. But generally speaking, the majority of this world, whether it is on the mats or off the mats, is a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, they can't all be winners.
No,
nor should they, because otherwise all that happens is that 10 out of 10 then becomes a 7 over time.
Yeah, and I think that's where, again, social media's got its part to play in this, but that's where it's difficult in terms of like managing expectations. Like managing expectations is a very real thing. Again, the extent of this conversation is far and wide, but like again, the intricacies of like, again, we could talk about fucking drug use. Like, there's a lot of drug use in jiu-jitsu, whether we like it or not. There's a lot of, I mean, there's a hell of a lot more drug use in strength sports as well. And that creates this narrative of like how somebody looks, the loads that they're lifting, the amount that they can train, and that is a factor, whether people like to believe it or not. Whether you're looking at some bodybuilder online who's telling you that, oh, the gear doesn't make that much difference. All right, well,
there's to jump on that. If I will find those studies and make fun of people for them in a little while, but there are multiple studies where they have shown that the gear very much does make a fucking difference.
Yeah.
There was one in particular where they had people who trained. What was it? They had people who trained. So they'd ask people to self-report, and you had people who self-reported that they weren't taking gear. You had people who self-reported that they were taking gear and were lifting, and then you had people who self-reported that they were taking gear and doing nothing. And I might be butchering this now. I apologize if I am. But essentially, what happened was that the group who were taking gear made the same progress as the people who were. It was taking gear and lifting, and then it was. Fuck. I am completely misremembering this.
I was going to say, you're not doing much for our scientific reputation here, Dave.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, those people can get fucked because they're also the ones obsessed with optimizing the line of pull. So, essentially, taking gear made a huge difference in comparison to people who were doing all the right things, eating well, lifting regularly, doing all of that. You can get away with an awful lot more junk and poor programming on gear. You can also, if you do it right and you train sensibly, make monumental progress on gear.
Yeah.
So it's not we're not saying that all people who are taking this stuff don't work hard and don't think about their programming, and I think that's what people immediately assume. But what we're saying is pretending it's not a huge fucking game changer that you are also trading your long-term health for is just a lie. You're kidding yourself. And the vast majority of the people who push that concept push it because they're justifying to themselves that they're taking something that they know probably isn't that good for them.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people will go fucking wild about that one. But you have to be careful about hiring a coach who's been on for a long time. And it's not necessarily a bad thing that they've been on. There are some phenomenal strength coaches out there who are very honest within their respective fields about taking and not taking and being on and coming off and all the rest of it. And the people who push it for too long often forget what it's like for the rest of us mere mortals to train and manage those stressors.
Well, it
And so
alters
they start
perception,
to
doesn't
write
it?
programs. Yeah, exactly. They'll write programs that are completely unrealistic for someone who isn't on gear, because you forget what it was like when you weren't on gear. In the same way that any of us could end up writing a program that if we didn't continue to work with people who were beginners, it would be very easy to forget how to program for beginners.
Yeah.
Because you're so used to where you've got to with your current clients.
Yeah. No, I agree, and again, that's a bit slightly sort of off topic, but I guess in a way that if we were to summarise that in a point, I guess to use a more general point, it's the old comparison is the thief of joy, isn't it? It's one of the big things from a strength perspective is the really good thing about strength is it's very easily measurable in terms of improvement.
Yeah.
So it's not like on the mats where you're like, it's very hard to measure improvement sort of week to week, month to month, year to year. Whereas in the gym, you can very much measure improvement. Like if you've gone from, I don't know, a goblet squat of 10 kilos to a back squat of 30 kilos, that's a significant improvement. And it can be very easy to get frustrated. Like I said, in this element of comparison. But it's realizing that, again, if we're talking about the average person, we're not talking about professional athletes, we're not talking about full-time athletes, whatever it is, strength sport, individuals, like, it's very easy to compare, but you've got to remember that what we're expecting is an element of normalcy. That's not even a word.
Normalcy,
Is normalcy a word? Element of
it
normal.
Is.
My limited vocabulary range there. But again, like one of the things that I always and this is not. I was watching the. Have you watched the? I presume you've watched it because you're a rugby union boy. Have you watched the Netflix Six Nations documentary?
Not much of it.
So
ironically,
it made me laugh that like there was one of the episodes was focusing on the Irish prop forward. I don't know his name because I don't really know much about Cian Healy. And in it was like in the gym squatting, like shifting something fucking tin.
The story around him has always been obsessed with.
Yeah,
like,
he's a big boy.
He pulled a Land Rover across the sand
to
train when he was 17. It was very fair play. He did.
But the thing that
it's not why he's a good prop.
The big thing that gets touted in like you hear a lot is like this like idea of like a double bodyweight squat.
Yeah.
It's quite a common marker that sort of, if anyone who's got any sense will now realise is probably not that meaningful long term in terms of performance metric, but it is a significant lift.
Yeah.
And it made me laugh because he was talking about it and he was sort of saying like, oh, it's over double bodyweight that. And I remember thinking like, we talk about this in terms of like jiu-jitsu or grappling, and I was like, but these are the blokes that are lifting that weight. Like they're not normal fucking human beings. Like it's a lot of weight that. Like if someone manages to take a double weight bodyweight squat off, like they're a fucking strong individual.
Yeah.
And it's ideas of like where are you. Again, this is one of the benefits of working with a coach. I said I'd not turn it into a sales pitch, but it's a coach should be able to help you rationalize what is a realistic target for you.
Yeah.
And the length of time that might take and what it would mean from a significant standpoint. Like if you're a 55 kilo girl, it's going to take you probably a long time to load 110 kilos onto a barbell and squat it. If you're a, I don't know, 80 kilo, 21-year-old purple belt who's in phenomenal athletic shape, that might not be as much of a challenge.
Yeah.
It might fall a bit easier. Before we go into the nuance of fucking axial loading and all that shit that comes with jiu-jitsu, but like that again, it's having realistic expectations in terms of what it is that you're trying to achieve. It's not about what some black belt world champions doing on Instagram. It's about what you're trying to do as an individual. And this again falls into that pitfall of like, well, how do you go about ruining someone? Well, you just compare them to what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
And that is it again, without sounding too nihilistic, it does not fucking matter. What matters is what you do on the mats.
Yeah.
All this sort of stuff is supposed to do is enhance what you can do on the mats in some way, whether it's allowing you to be on the mats for more time, whether it's allowing you to be a bit more robust in a scramble, whether it's ability to, I don't know, power through a movement, whether it's like fighting against a sweep or a takedown, whatever it is. Like, you can look at it from a performance means, or from like just simply being on the mat a little bit more. And being able to handle the
fact that you're like a smaller guy in the room.
Yeah. You can handle
a bit more. I've got
a
a few people doing that.
Yeah, you can handle a bit more. Like, and I've lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
Well, the point being that it's how does it influence your time on the mats? Because if what you and I do means that someone can train less or at a lower intensity or for less time or they're losing sessions, then we fucked our job up, because the whole purpose of this is to make you better on the mats. It's not to make you better in the gym. And that is what a lot of people get caught up on, including some strength and conditioning coaches. There are people out there in this profession who are not very good at this profession, and they lose sight of the fact that the gym and the weight room isn't the most important thing to their clients or their athletes. And it shouldn't be, because who cares? Like we said previously, who cares what you can lift if on the mats you're fucking useless? It's a means to an end. So we lift so that you are strong enough to do the training that you need to do. You're resilient enough to be able to do that training. Your joints are stronger. Your bones are thicker. Your muscles are as big as they need to be able to cope with the loads that you're putting through them without you being too big for your weight class, unless that's what you're asking for. So that you can do more of the sport for less either pain or discomfort or whatever as the payoff at the other end of it. And that's a hard sell, and it's why I changed my name to fucking Get Strong Roll More, because that's literally what I'm telling you to do. If my program doesn't get you stronger so that you can do more of the thing that you actually really fucking enjoy, then I haven't done my job.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be a lot.
And again, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Is like it's sometimes it's difficult to have a conversation with an individual, especially somebody who trains a lot. Like, let's say they've got a really high mat frequency of, like, let's say 6 sessions a week.
Yeah.
But they don't do any lifting. It's a very difficult thing to, like, the way I always say it is like, it's like a pension. So every month, whether you're employed or self-employed, hopefully if you're self-employed, you pay a little bit of money into your pension. And the idea is that over time, by the time you hit retirement age, which if the Tory government have anything to say, it won't ever fucking retire. But
dead.
That's another topic.
You can have your pension in your coffin.
Yeah. It'll pay off your fucking funeral care. But the idea is that you invest a little bit every month. Not that this is not financial advice, because I haven't got a fucking clue about how it works, but this is my understanding. You invest a little bit every month, and then by the time you get to retirement age, you've got a nice little pot of gold at the end that you can live on. Now, the comparison of that, if you're somebody who trains really a lot on the mats, but don't sort of do any sort of additional extras, is what you're doing essentially is you're taking your paycheck every month and you're just spending it. It's fuck it. There's live like there's no tomorrow. You work it out when you get there. And sometimes it's a difficult conversation to have when you're like neither one of me and Dave will ever deny that the sport is not the most important thing. The sport is the most important thing.
I was going to say.
I know, fucking hell. I confused myself then. The sport, 100%, it is the primary focus point. Like, I'll have clients, and if sometimes they have competitions, and again, this is my decision based on a person that I know extremely well, I'll get a message saying, like, I don't know what to do, and I'll always be just go and train, get the mat working. Now, it's very difficult to tell somebody, right, what we might actually have to do is a little bit less mat work, so we can do 1 or 2 sessions a week in the gym. But what that will mean is that we can potentially do that for much longer.
Yeah.
So it's
You're not going to end up 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off.
Yeah, it's the idea of the same as the pension of, like, okay, we have to take a little bit of our money. But yes, we'd all like, I don't know how much people put into the pension, 100 quid, 500 quid, whatever it is. we would all love to have that in our paychecks. Like, it'd be really nice. Like, me and Dave are self-employed. I'm pretty sure it'd be nice to have an extra couple £100 in our paycheck at the end of the month.
Yeah.
But we obviously understand that long term, that's going to pay dividends. And that's the exact same thing with strength training. It's sometimes you might have to do a little bit less than you want to, only a smidge. We're not telling you need to fuck it all off, just a tiny bit.
Yeah.
But long term, it's going to pay dividends and reward, and it's going to allow you, like Dave said, to do the thing that you actually want to do.
Yeah, and it sounds stupid, and I know I've kind of pushed it with some of my marketing and stuff, but that's why, like, my point is, you're going to die one day. Every single one of us is, and you want to sit on your deathbed going, God, I wish I'd done 5 strength and conditioning sessions a week. No, you'll go, I wish I was doing more of the things that I enjoy. And for jiu-jitsu guys, that's being on the fucking mats. Like, for other people that we work with, that might be playing with their kids, or like going out and enjoying themselves because they're retired. Like, it doesn't matter what that thing is, but this is a means to an end. Strength and conditioning allows you to do more and at a higher intensity, if it's a sport, often, of what you actually enjoy. And so it isn't necessarily the sexiest thing. And when you look at the people who are trying to make this sexy, it's because either that is their sport, or because they make money from doing things that make people go, oh, by watching their videos online. And that's missing the point. Is we're not saying that this should be boring, because a key part of being a good coach and making sure that someone can commit to something long term is to make sure it's enjoyable and they actually like doing what they're doing. But at the same time, it doesn't need to be, there's no fucking secret sauce. There's no magic piece of equipment you don't own that's going to be a game changer, because the big rocks are that you do one, like, I had someone ask me the other day, is one session enough? I was like, well, it's better than zero. One session a week, 52 sessions a year is better than 0 sessions a year. Obviously, doubling that would be even better, but it doesn't mean that it needs to be that. Like, I'm sure you've got clients that might train once a week. I know I've got a fair few who do. And if you can't meet someone's needs over the long term on that time scale, then you can't do your job. Now, it's faster if you've got 2 or 3 sessions a week, and if you're capable of recovering, and your life and your sport and all the things that you do outside of it and your interests mean that you can. But it also means that you actually need to look at this a little bit more long term, because that's when you start to reap things. Like, I think it's why people often put up transformation photos and stuff, and like, here's where I started when I was a coach, because people see where you're at now. Like Will Wayland, that we both know, people will go, he has a ludicrous RDL and a ridiculous front squat, and people will go, oh, how did you get that? And he's like, he just posts a video of him from like 2010 doing front squats, and it's like 14 years of this. And that's not saying that everyone needs to do that, but it's quite liberating. It means it is that straightforward. If you can find a thing that you can stick to for a consistent period of time, those benefits are just waiting to be had, in a way that I think sometimes people assume there needs to be something special.
Yeah.
And especially in an era where, like you said, we've got a lot more grapplers talking openly about performance enhancing drug use. I've heard guys in their 20s talk about needing to do that. If you're in your 20s, and you think that you need performance enhancing drugs and you're not lifting weights, you're a fucking idiot. Because you've got so much of that stuff coursing through you already. You can sleep, you've got fewer responsibilities, most of you. It's possible. And you're considering that so that you can beat up some like 40-year-old dad of 2. It's just, it blows my fucking mind how much people will try and avoid just doing a thing because it seems like it's difficult or it requires some consistency or whatever. And it's hard because you and I enjoy all of this. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this job. Like, I like lifting weights. I think it's fun. But I also have clients where I know that they don't, and so I have to make the process enjoyable. So I guess if we were going to boil some of this down, because we've both gone on a little fucking ramble like we always do, but first it would be take a longer term view. Do less than you think that you need to. Enjoy it. as silly as these things sound, they're more holistic and they're going to be more useful to you, because if you're
Yeah, for sure.
consistently going in and doing something, you're going to get something out of it. The next would be record what you're doing so that you can see whether the weights are going up, because if they're not, then you realize maybe you need to change what you're doing.
Yeah, write it down.
Yeah, so my cousin actually was doing a load of knees over toes stuff for knee pain. Or my cousin's son, sorry. And we were having a chat about all of this, and he was very into the like knees over toes, Ben Patrick stuff. And I said, he's like, oh, I've been using this and it should be helping my knee pain. I said, how long have you had knee pain for? He said, oh, about 6 months. I was like, well, how long have you been doing this stuff for? Oh, about 5. How much has it improved in that space of time? And he sort of stopped and went, oh, not that much. I was like, so in 5 months, this hasn't improved any pain. Do you think maybe it's time to investigate some alternatives and see if they could do it?
Yeah.
Because it's very easy for people to lose track of where they are and not realize how little that they've done, especially if you're not writing your sessions down, or you're not at least just keeping some kind of record of what you've managed to do or not managed to do. So that would be my extra one. We'd never write anything down, and I'd make up the sessions on the fucking spot if I was trying to ruin
just
someone.
have some degree of log.
Yeah.
Just understand the direction that you're going in is a big thing.
We probably need to talk about exercises because we need to call this quite soon.
Yeah, the exercise selection is a big one. And again, the problem, obviously, we should probably do more than just this one episode on this, really, because this is our job and we can fucking talk about this for a long time, because there is a lot of nuance that goes into it. Just like skill training on the mats, like, it's no different, really. It's coaching is coaching, like Dave, or teaching, like Dave always likes to say. But exercise selection, so, I mean, this is an easy one. There are no optimal exercises for grappling. There is arguably some better decisions. There is arguably some worse decisions. I
wouldn't even say arguably. I'd say there are definitely
some definitely
stinkers. Better, definitely worse.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that. So when we talk about like good or bad, a lot of the time what we're talking about is, again, there's a time component. So what is it you're trying to get out of something in X amount of sets or reps or a period of time over a month, whatever it is, a training block. There's what does it actually facilitate in terms of improvement? So what is the sort of thing that you want to get out of it in a period of, obviously that's not a time factor. It's like, what is the adaptation that you're chasing for? So the time is obviously, can we get that adaptation in X amount of time? I've lost my train of thought again.
So better and worse exercises.
Yeah, better and worse exercises.
So it'd be stuff like, how long are you going to do that exercise for? So I don't like, just to give a really simple example, I like front-loaded squats for grapplers. I don't really like back squats. And some of that is to do with my mentor very early on, well, not very early on, and I still work with him, he's still my coach, Will Wayland, made the point that when you have grapplers and MMA fighters, often, and it's improved, but often when you get them to barbell back squat, because both sports involve a lot of this, you often see some pretty shocking back squat form to begin with, because it's a more technical lift and it does take more time. Now, there are outliers. There are people who find it quite natural. You can do that with them. I like to keep back squats for short periods of time or for lower weight, because I find that the wheels tend to fall off quite quickly for grapplers in terms of pain or shoulder issues or neck problems. Whereas front squats, because they put you into the opposing position to what you're used to, actually seem to help quite a lot with those things, and we can run them for extended periods of time without anyone having any complaints other than the fact that they're having to do front squats. And that, for me, is a sensible decision. We could talk about, like you said, axial loading through the spine and stuff like that. Maybe that's for a different day. But by and large, we can run it for longer. We can get almost all of the same benefits as we can from a back squat. And people don't complain about it. They don't get hurt. We don't have to cycle away from it very often. That's win-win for me, because it means that they continue to improve and we haven't had to make any major changes.
So that you've made a really good point there. So like, exercise selection for me, obviously, again, because it is our jobs, it's much easier for me and Dave to make relevant decisions. Is it knee based? Is it hip based? Is it like you said, anterior loaded, posterior loaded. What is it that we're trying to get out of it? For somebody who might be listening to this, who's just trying to get a bit more organisation between your strength training, the three main primary things that you want to consider is, first and foremost, can you do it for a long time? So do you enjoy the exercise? I'm not saying like you have to love an exercise, but do you not hate it enough that you can consistently perform it? Can you actually load it relatively? Like, is there like if we use a squat an example, a pistol squat isn't a bad exercise, but it's almost going to be pointless because
it's not very loadable.
It's not very loadable. It's quite a difficult skill to achieve. There's a lot of context around that: balance, stability, proprioception, all that sort of shit. Like
segment length.
Like, so are you going to be able to perform it? Are you going to be able to load it? Also, can you progress it and regress it if needed? So that's four technically, but we'll call it three because progression and regression are the same thing. Three really simple goals when it comes to picking an exercise. So if we think about that in context, again, back squat, you've got multiple bilateral squatting variations, front squats, goblet squats, you can progress and regress. It's really easy to load it with high intensity, low volume, but it's also really easy to do it for high volume, low intensity. And again, you can perform it for long periods of time without too much back off. Again, other examples are like a bench press. A bench press is, you can load it for high reps, low reps. Everyone enjoys chest training. You've got dumbbells, press ups, loads of different variations that are similar from a challenge perspective. You need some variation, and you're going to get a shitload of bang for buck. Very similar to the back squat. So that's what we mean by exercise selection, because it's easy to progress. It's easy to overload. Whereas within the jiu-jitsu space, what we get is a lot of like these exercises, like specific exercises they're replicating, or they're certain, I don't know, there's certain constraints around the exercise in terms of like say proprioception, balance, whatever it is, like, and they're just so one of the issues.
Or they're using specific bits of kit. The reason that the barbell's still fucking around is because it's very easy to load.
It's very easy to load.
That resolves most of your issues. Oh, I'm only going to use kettlebells. Well, sorry, mate, I've got a 32 down there, and if that's your limit, you're not very fucking strong. Like my ladies can chuck that around. You need to make sure it's loadable.
And that's not to say that kettlebells are bad. They've got their time and their place.
No, I love them. They're fantastic.
Yeah. We're just what Dave's trying to say is we're making decisions that are relatively easy to achieve things with. And that's what you want essentially. It's like using variation. Now again, like, you could get proper arsey about it, and you could argue the difference between a barbell bench press and a dumbbell bench press, and like you said, like moment arms, all that sort of short force profiles, all that sort of shit. But
you could be a fucking loser, but you don't have to be.
But you don't have to be. Like, in the grand scheme of things, it isn't going to matter that much. It matters to us because that's our job, and we need to make decisions relative to those things based on the individuals in front of us. But if you're an individual listening to this, the amount of variation that's going to make in your actual development and the correlation to that on the mat is probably going to be minor. Like, it's very minimal.
Consistency is king.
Always. And again, there's got to be a bit of effort with it.
Or
like
queen.
You need to be able to queen. Consistency is there's got to be effort. It's sustained effort consistently. That's what we're after. It's not just about like turning up. Obviously, something is always better than nothing, but also half-arsing something might as well also be nothing, realistically.
So just, sorry to cut in, because we really do need to cut this short in a second.
All
right. For exercise selection, you would be better off doing 1 or 2 or 3, if you've got time, full body sessions. You want squat, push, pull, hinge, and maybe some core or some arms or whatever assistance work, like biceps, wrists, whatever. But you also want to make sure that you've got one day where you're doing horizontal pushes and pulls, and one day where you're doing vertical pushes and pulls. And that at its crux is if you've got all of those things and you can tick them off each session, then you're doing well. The only thing I would probably add is some form of jumps and throws as well. but Andrew and I would probably classify those as just high velocity squats or pushes or pulls
Yeah,
or
it's
whatever.
just and for the most part, it's again, you could probably play around with that a little bit. To be fair, like the amount of variation that you can, like obviously plyometric based or jump based, throw based training, and the integration into grappling. Grappling is a very low, if you want to get scientific, very low velocity sport.
It is.
So the integration of like more plyometric based stuff, in terms of like being anal about exercise selection for that, you could just put a timer on for 5 minutes and just be like, right, how many different ways can you jump across a room? That's probably one of the best interventions from a grappling perspective, is because you're just building capacity through movement. It's not you and learning to organize around a slightly different variation of task. It doesn't have to be like sprinting where there's a lot of stretch shortening cycle, a lot of ground contact time. With grappling, it's just like set a 5-minute timer. How many different ways can you jump across a room? One leg, two leg, sideways, and just do that. Like that's more than sufficient. Again, bit of network in there. Certain areas that you can target, but again, that's going to be individual based: elbows, backs, knees, all that sort of shit. But if you pick relevant exercises, a lot of that base will be covered anyway. Like back squats, you get knees, you get a bit of back, you get a bit of hips, or split squats, whatever it is. I'm a big split squat fan. Bench press, you get shoulders, you get elbows, you get wrists, you get all that sort of shit, pull-ups, things like that. You cover most of those bases. You might need a little bit of some finer tweaking here and there, some isolatory work, like Dave mentioned, some arm work, core work, neck work, whatever it is. But for the most part, your bases will be covered.
Perfect. Right. Well, we're gonna have to leave it there, mate. Thank you very much.
Pleasure as always.
As always, if you've got stuff to comment, you can comment it below, or you can get in touch with us on. I'm at Get Strong Roll More. You're at Brotherhood
Performance. Yeah.
Very nice. Right. Cheers, buddy.
Perfect. Right, Dave. Have a good one.
You too, mate. Bye.
See you later, mate. Bye.